Good evening, viewers. Thank you for tuning in to Diversity Dignified. This is roughly a year anniversary since I started this program, which started off as Gender Dignity, Unique and Equal. And it was born because last year in 2015, I had been invited to read off some of the names, both in Augusta and Portland, Maine, of folks that had been killed for Transgender Day of Remembrance, which is held November 20th every year. As I was reading off these folks' names, it really struck fear into my heart. And one of the thoughts that I had is, what if it's my name being read off next year? And felt like I wanted to do something to address this epidemic of violence against the transgender community. So tonight I have with me Jacie Leoppold, who's unfortunately come up against a tremendous amount of violence, and she's come out on the other end. She's thriving today. But we are going to interview her. It's a more serious interview tonight than you're usually accustomed to. To give you some statistics for transgender people, 1 in 10 transgender people will be killed, and they will be killed by being beaten to death. And I cannot think of anything scarier than that. And our suicide rate is really off the charts. Our suicide rate is at a rate of 47%. So there's some real pressing issues in our community, and this is why this show is born. This is why we're addressing it. And we know if you're watching this that you are an ally, so I thank you so much. So without further ado, I'm going to start the first part of the program the way I always do, which is to introduce Jacie, and she's going to just let you know her name, her pronouns, a little bit about herself, and also she's going to include her transition story. Thank you, Jacie, for being here with us.
Thank you, Matthew. My name is Jacie Leoppold. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I started transition around the age of 31. I'm a professional chef or a professional cook, and I'm a cook, basically. So I started in the restaurant industry, and it's a very tough, I would say boys club is a good way to describe it. When you're working in the kitchen, it's a lot of male egos. It's a very fast-paced job. It's I would say, also let me emphasize that I was in Arkansas. So this was Arkansas, where everything is not quite as progressive as other states, Maine especially. So I was getting ready, when I knew I was going to transition, I was keeping it a secret from the restaurant because I was scared of them finding out about it. And it wasn't a physical safety issue with me. It was more of fear of losing my job or possibly my reputation in the town. And so I had a few other things going on in my life where I owned my own business for a little while, or was co-owner of a restaurant, and it closed, and I was working at this restaurant called the Back Porch Grill before I started transition. So actually, let me back way up.
Okay.
Let's get way back before all this stuff and actually start talking a little bit about when I was younger. And
yeah, I was hoping that you'd tell, one thing viewers enjoy knowing is when you knew maybe that this was going on for you.
Yes. Okay, so I knew at a very young age that I was transgender, and I probably around the age of 4 and 5, when I was really starting to come into it, I realized that this wasn't something that I should be talking about. If, for instance, I got in trouble for letting my cousin paint my fingernails or something like that and having it scrubbed off kind of harshly. But I always knew that was who I was and part of my life. So,
did you have the language for that?
I didn't, especially back then.
Sure.
When I was 13 years old, I believe it would have been 1995, I told my mom for the first time, and I had no word to put with it. I couldn't say I'm transgender or any of that stuff because we didn't have the internet back then. There was no knowledge, and again, this was in Arkansas. So I told my mom at the age of 13, and to my surprise, not planning, just being a 13-year-old, I had no idea that it was April Fool's Day.
Oh, okay.
So I told my mother about it, and she was initially pretty shocked, and I could tell that there was some concern, but then right away she thought it was an April Fool's joke. So she kind of laughed it off, and I had to say, no, Mom, I'm being serious. And so we had a pretty serious conversation about it, and I was told, we don't talk about this.
Okay.
So we were never going to talk about it again. It was going to be my secret between my mom and I.
Okay.
So at that age, I, just immediately felt like I had no place to go to. It was, again, in Arkansas in the 1990s.
And there wasn't any awareness, really.
There was no LGBT community at all that I knew of. There was no queer kids back then. There was no community. There was nobody to talk to. If there was somebody in school that might have been queer, it just wasn't discussed.
Right.
So, and that kind of triggered me to go on this path of, I can never be myself. I have to repress who I am.
Sure.
And ultimately, I stayed in the state of Arkansas until I was 18. As soon as I finished high school and everything, I said, I'm getting out of here. So I moved to New Hampshire immediately and started exploring different aspects of myself and my sexuality and my gender identity.
Mm-hmm.
And so after that, I never could get over that hurdle of I need to transition. And still kind of off and on back then, we still didn't have the proper terminology for transgender people, and it wasn't popular, I guess, the way it is now. So it just was spiraling down this level of depression constantly in and out of these states, and I would just bury it in a relationship. I would bury all my emotions with a partner, and that was one way of dealing with it, and to feel more heteronormative if I was in a relationship with a cisgendered woman. And so it became uncontrollable in the depression.
Sure.
And I was around the age of 25. I made my first real suicide attempt. And it was in a heat of a moment and there was substance involved. I was drinking at the time. So I cut my wrist.
Okay.
So then I was institutionalized for that for the first time. And luckily for me, I had such a support system from friends that were actually there to rescue me and take me to the hospital and make sure that I survived this, because I did not want to survive it at the time. And so I was in the hospital for 30 days. Coming out of the hospital, my parents pulled together, they got me a plane ticket. They flew me back to Arkansas, and that's where I kind of just had this generalized notion that transition this is when I kind of knew more about it at this time. And I knew that I just had this general notion that it was unattainable for me.
Okay.
I did see people transitioning, and I saw how hard their lives were and the struggles they were going through. So I was scared to go through with it. So I kind of just buried myself in my career.
Yeah.
And how I did that was just, I would work 60 to 70 hours a week. I had no real life outside of work. In the culinary industry, as a chef, there's a lot of partying, a lot of outlets and stuff, and I never partook in that. So people were often curious, why do I just go home? Why are you single?
Right.
Why aren't you coming out with us?
Isolating.
Yeah. And it was because I was just depressed constantly.
Yeah.
So, and it was a kind of a cumulative slope, and I was getting to that point where the first time I had made my attempt on my life, it was kind of rash, and it was not planned out. I was having this scary notion of, I was actually formulating a plan, and I was very quiet about it, and nobody knew it, that I was planning to end my life. And so somewhere in this battle of it getting closer to me actually doing this, I made this just kind of breakthrough, and I said, I'm going to transition. This is who I am.
Yeah.
So I'm going to transition, and if something happens to me, I tried.
Yeah.
No matter what happens, I tried to be myself, or I was myself. So I started reaching out to friends and family. I found a great support network in Arkansas, surprisingly, and started getting the advice that I needed to seek out the medical professionals, and I started HRT.
Okay.
And surprisingly, a lot of my family members and my friends and stuff especially the ones that I thought were going to have the biggest problem with it, they really opened up and received me.
Where they came to be
Yes.
supportive. Okay, good.
So I was doing really well in that aspect. And it's a slow-moving process. And again, I was working at that restaurant, the Back Porch Girl, where in the state of Arkansas for that particular job, and I was making a fairly decent amount of money there.
Okay, good. Yeah.
So, and like I said, I kind of had some other business ventures that ended, and I had to go back there. And just knowing the atmosphere of the anti-LGBT stance of the place, I didn't really want to go back to work there, but I needed that income because transition is not cheap.
It's expensive.
And there is no insurance, or it's getting better, I understand now, but at the time when I was beginning this, there was no insurance company that was medically recognizing what I was doing and what I'm going through.
Sure.
So I needed that elevated level of income.
Yeah.
So I went back to work for the Back Porch Girl, and I was still struggling with my transition because no matter what you do, you can't prepare for it. It's not going to be easy.
Okay, so let me just clarify. So your friends and immediate family knew you were transitioned, but your coworkers did not know.
No, I was still presenting as a male at work.
Right. Okay.
But as far as social media and my family members and outside of work, I was female.
Okay.
And it was a small town. I had a few close calls with people finding out directly at work, for instance, going to the hairdresser to get my hair done. And one of the girls that worked there was also a server in our restaurant. And I had no idea that that was her part-time job, and she was a full-time hairdresser.
Okay.
So we had a brief conversation for my safety, and she expressed concern too and promised not to talk about it at work.
Okay.
So it was getting evident that it was time for me to move on from there and start seeking another place to work, but there just wasn't the opportunity available. And I had been starting to put my resume out, and I was kind of feeling trapped there. In my mind, in Arkansas, I was thinking, who's going to hire a transsexual woman in the kitchen?
So can we lead up to, so how were your coworkers before they found out about your transition?
Okay, working for the Back Porch Girl and in that restaurant was a lot of fraternity brothers in the actual restaurant. So it was very much, it was anti-LGBT. I don't believe you had even one queer person working in the building. Okay. There was a lot of gay jokes. There was a lot of trans jokes.
So you already knew that this was kind of
It was a type of person where if somebody walked into work late and just the joking and the banter never stopped, they would say, "Where were you at today? You must have been with this man."
Right.
So, I mean, it was a very tough emotional struggle for me to keep working there.
Sure.
So leading up to the Christmas party, I was getting further and further into my medical transition with HRT, and I was already starting to experience a lot of physical changes. I was starting to look different. Not only that, I began exercising. I'd lost a lot of weight. People were making comments, you look really well, you've lost a lot of weight, or why are you starting to look strange like this?
So they were noticing.
My hair was getting a little longer, still pretty short at the time, but
yeah.
I just kind of ignored it and just kept going with.
Sure.
And I needed the money, so.
And then, so I'm gonna push this up a little. How long were you working there?
I worked there for a total of 4 years.
4 years. And so my understanding, Jacie, because I read the article about that what happened that evening, there was a holiday party, and you were out having a good time, I'm assuming, and then things changed it sounds very quickly.
Correct. There was a lot of drinking going on.
Sure.
There was, and I drank too. It was a holiday party.
Yeah.
So at a point, later in the evening, after a lot of the people that were there had actually already left, I was struck in the face by one of my coworkers, and when he hit me, I was knocked unconscious. So there was a group of them there present, so I don't know much more what happened after that, after being struck and knocked unconscious. I woke up, and I was on the floor, and I was covered in blood. And I remember just having this immediate reaction of fear and shock and embarrassment and fleeing from the restaurant. And one of the girls actually helped me, got paper towels because I was bleeding profusely. Right. So I went immediately to my car and locked myself in the car. I remember a few people did try to come and but I just would not answer. And I sat in the car and waited till everybody had left. Immediately after this, I had actually some time had passed and my face had begun swelling. So I saw my face in the mirror for the first time and realized how bad it was. My immediate reaction was to call the police. So I called the police, they showed up, they saw me, they called the paramedics. The paramedics took me to the hospital, and just the magnitude of how serious what had just happened to me was not registering, because from the pure shock.
Yes.
But they had me hooked up to the MRI, or they put me in an MRI, they did the full scan, they had me hooked up to heart monitors and everything. They were really monitoring my vitals, which I didn't understand, but at the time, I'm expecting the doctor to come in and say, well, you've got some bruising, we need you to go home and get some rest.
Right.
I wasn't prepared for the doctor to come in and tell me that I had fractures in my skull and a shattered orbital socket.
Oh my goodness.
And by that point, it was the first time I really saw myself, and my entire face was so swollen that it just...
And nobody had called an ambulance for you?
No, nobody in the restaurant that was present at the party called the police. They didn't call an ambulance. They just left me to go outside and just be left alone. Basically, they just let me be. And again, the police still hadn't taken a statement because of how severe the incident was. So I was in the hospital waiting for the police to come and take my statement. When they came in and spoke to me, it was very brief, very few questions. One thing that stood out to me right away was when I was describing the person who initially hit me. I didn't know his last name, but as soon as I said his first name and gave them a description, they immediately put his last name in there. And
so they knew who he was.
They said, we have a history of interacting with him, and this sounds exactly like something that he would do. So they said that they were going to do their follow-up investigation and they'd be back in touch with me. Some time went by, or before I even get to that, I was still in the hospital, and in shock, I called my mother. So my mother and my sister came and picked me up from the hospital. And just that level of embarrassment to be that my mom has to come and pick me up looking like this.
That you look like this.
Yeah.
And you're the one being embarrassed, like you've done something. Can I ask, okay, so the police knew this person. Did they have a history of violence with other people, or how did they know him?
They knew him through violent acts. And even there was a point, probably 2, maybe 3 months right before this had happened, where as a server, he was wearing an eye patch on the floor because he had been in a bar brawl and had a black eye. Okay.
Now, his attacking you, to the best of your knowledge, was this because of you being trans, or was he just out of control, or?
It was because of my transition. At the time, I had no idea. I had no idea that anything. It was just suspect.
Yeah.
And I told the police officer, when he asked me, would there be any motivation for them to do this to you? And I said it could possibly be a hate crime. Yeah. He didn't write that down. He didn't take any. It didn't register to him that this could be serious.
Okay.
But. So yeah, for a week right after this happened, I spent the week in my house. I wouldn't come out. Sure. I wouldn't answer the phone. My dad lived in Colorado at the time. He drove down. I didn't even know that he had been at the police department just days after this happened, demanding information. Mm-hmm. He'd already had a copy of the police report because I had regressed back into that state of depression where I was before, where I was I was suicidal again, and I was already like. At one point I remember I tried to leave my house to go get something, and I even put a hoodie on and put on huge sunglasses, and you could just see that one whole side of my face was just completely swollen and bruised. And so I was just I'd shut down. I didn't foresee any possible outcome for this other than, I was gonna possibly take my life again. So,
I just want to interject that because that's such a common response for folks with trauma. Somehow we take it upon ourselves like it's our fault. And I'm wondering if the fact that you were drinking was playing a part in this, like, oh, somehow you did something wrong.
And immediately when I was seeking counsel and an attorney and speaking to the police officers, that was a lot of what I was met with from different people.
Was that you were drinking? Yeah.
Was you put yourself in that situation, you should have known better. You were responsible for what happened to you. And I received a lot of shame for it. I was being shamed in a lot of different avenues. One attorney that I spoke to told me also, he said that this is Arkansas. You have to understand that you will face an Arkansas jury here. He said, if we do get this to trial, and he said, so if we do get this to trial and there's a court hearing, he said, you need to be aware that it's going to be an Arkansas jury, and they're going to be basically scratching their heads and going, what is transgender?
Right.
Nobody's going to take you seriously.
And to me, offhand, I'm sorry to interject this, but I think there's going to be a double whammy. First off, we blame the victim still. Even those of us who know better sometimes do that. And you're transgender, so it's like you deserve it or you're not even human. So what the heck?
Yeah, and also a lot, once it started to escalate further on and get further into the community, a lot of people were still approaching me with he and his pronouns and saying, oh, well, just basically a guy got beat up.
Right.
It's not really that serious.
Right.
So that was what I was facing, still being in Arkansas.
You had your skull bashed in. That's pretty serious.
Yeah.
And your eye socket.
They told me in the hospital before I left, they said that I was going to need surgery to have the bones set so that they would heal. Of course, I had no insurance at the time. I had no option of a surgery. And even so, I can still see to this day, I can still see a lump in my cheek. I can tell the difference in my nose is completely different than it was before this. So yeah, I tried to just ignore it. If I don't talk about this, then it didn't happen.
Right.
If, it was such a level of, even though I knew that they were anti-LGBT, I never would have suspected that I would be in any kind of immediate danger from them.
Right.
So in another way, I was looking at the fact that these were people that I'd known for 4 years. We'd had personal conversations together, talked about our families, and the fact that something this dangerous and deadly could come from that situation was just, I didn't want it to exist. I didn't want that to have happened.
And that's something else I want to interject now. You said you were surprised that it wasn't seen as a hate crime, and I can tell you right there that's why, because you had a prior relationship. And it's understood that if you have a prior relationship, it's never constituted as a hate crime. And sometimes it's really awful, but even in Kentucky, for example, texting someone even one time constitutes a prior relationship. So that makes sense to me. I don't agree with it. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, and so I didn't understand why. I mean, even if, in my opinion, in my eyes, if a cisgendered woman got assaulted at work by a male coworker or even a female coworker, I feel like the police would
take it serious.
There would be some sort of investigation. Somebody would have been arrested. There would have been some conclusion.
So no arrests have been made. Nothing has happened.
Nothing has happened. And I have an attorney in the state of Arkansas who was very motivated to take the case once it went viral. And that's how I got the attention that I did. It was a social media post that I'd made after almost 7 months of silence. I actually attended a funeral and wake of a transgender woman in the community that had committed suicide. And it was it was troubling on so many different angles because she was misgendered in the obituary and in the funeral process. There was a lot of different emotions. The family was upset, friends were upset. So I remember being moved in that moment to think that I cannot just sit here and be quiet with what had happened to me and just keep pretending like it didn't happen.
Right.
So I went home that night and I made a post on Facebook, and I just summed up everything that happened to me at the party and being blamed for it because I had had a drink.
Yep.
And I just hit send and I went to bed. I woke up the next morning and that post had over 6,000 shares. I had so many email messages in my inbox and had thousands of friend requests. I had celebrities reaching out to me. It was very moving to see the community come together like that and pull and support. But at the same time, it was escalating the situation and making it uncomfortable for me to be in the state of Arkansas.
Sure. Because then you're kind of defined by the trauma.
Yeah, and it was just ongoing. There were people calling the police station from the UK and from Australia and all these different countries, and they're demanding.
Okay.
So there was a lot of pressure on the police department. And to further the incident, they at one point released a letter that used my dead name and used all male pronouns with me in the light of everything that was happening, and said that they had no evidence at all to suspect a hate crime.
Well, even if it wasn't a hate crime, it's a crime. I mean...
Exactly. Yeah. Something needs to happen.
Right.
So then that letter, actually I found out about this letter through Twitter, and it was already going viral before I even knew it existed. And you will see it's actually in some of the Huffington Post articles. So it's available for people to read. I mean, the police department wrote it, they said it, they clearly viewed me as a man and were not interested in investigating the assault. So I had to leave Arkansas.
Absolutely.
So, and it was kind of, I was already getting to that point anyways, even before this started to go viral, just the culture of Arkansas. And I have some really good friends there. There's some really amazing people there.
Sure.
But as far of progression for the LGBT community, it's just not the same as it is in other places, and people don't realize what they think is a level of normalcy there, and the harassment that they face on a daily basis is not normal in other places because they're just so accustomed to it. So if they grew up there, that's what they know.
Right.
So my transition was really tough in Arkansas because of that. I worked a lot with the public in the restaurants. I would get harassed by customers, made fun of, laughed at. I would have coworkers post, especially Caitlyn Jenner was trending at the time. People would post Caitlyn Jenner memes that were coworkers of mine that would go too far with genitals and body parts. And I would have absolutely nobody in my management or anybody that would stand up for me in these instances.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get away from there. And luckily, I had such an outreach and such a large group of people wanting to help me that I was able to raise the funds and move to Maine.
Oh, okay. Why did you pick Maine, can I ask?
Well, I'd been in New England before, in New Hampshire, and I just remember it being very open and comfortable, and I have a stepsister that lives here in Portland. Okay. So it made more, and plus the world is such a small place for me, and it's odd this way. Like, I have a friend here from Arkansas already, so I already had some friends here.
Yeah.
So I picked Maine, and as soon as I got here, just the quality of my life, it just improved right away.
Okay. Can I ask, when you were going through, I mean, because anybody's gone through what you've gone through, has to have dark times. And to give some hope to folks, like what some of the thoughts maybe that comforted you? What some of the supports that were helpful to you?
I was so lost in that. especially with everything that was going on, and I noticed that I had this huge following, and I was so focused on the violence in our community, and I was so afraid of it, and I realized that I was advocating it by constantly sharing murders and assaults, and somebody got fired from their job, so I would share that, and I was I not only was a victim to this, but I was also victimizing other people in the community by creating this level of fear.
I gotcha. Okay, I see.
So I just kind of just realized that one day, and I said, I have to not do this. I can't have these, because a lot of people were looking up to me and saying that I was brave for coming out and doing what I did and standing up in what had happened to me. And I realized that I can't do that, so I had to make a switch and say, I'm going to be positive today. So if I post on social media today, it's going to be a positive post. It's going to be uplifting.
Okay.
And I will notice that, I'll say that once I started portraying this, it wasn't just something that I was saying. It actually started to become, my life started to become more positive in general.
So you're putting the positive energy out, and that was kind of what was coming back to you.
Yes. So that was just a life changer right there.
Yeah.
And at one point I almost just walked away from everything that had happened to me because it was too much to talk about, even sitting here with you right now. I'm not just a very out there person. That's why I like to work in kitchens. I'm in the back of the house. I don't have a lot of attention on me.
Right,
I can have my creative outlet in my food and the guests see it, and that's enough for me. So to be here in a studio right now talking about this is really kind of nerve-wracking for me.
I bet it is, and the thing is too that really struck me is that you brought it up again 7 months later, because I was doing some research and preparation for this interview, and one thing that was really disconcerting to me was that very often a survivor will come forward and be shot down, as you were, shamed and silenced. And on average, it takes 10 to 15 years for the person to get the courage to speak again. And you did it in 7 months. So you are brave.
Well, thank you. I did so when I started speaking at 7 months later, I received a cease and desist order from the owner of the restaurant.
Okay.
Saying that if I didn't stop talking about what had happened to me there, that they were actually going to sue me.
Okay.
So I took that letter and shared it on social media, and that was what sparked the first lawyer's interest, the one that didn't end up helping me.
Okay.
There always seemed to be this false level of hope in my community in Arkansas. When I did talk about it in Arkansas, everybody would seem like they were there to help, they wanted to help, and then once we started a ball moving, everything would just kind of stop.
Just kind of fizzles out. Okay.
But once the post that I made went viral on social media, it was no longer something that was in the control of my community. It was international at that point. I was being contacted by places like CNN and the Huffington Post, and I was having conversations with Buck Angel, and I didn't even realize that within the massive amount of people that had flooded into my friends' feed that I actually had accrued some lawyers and celebrities.
But even still, though, it still hasn't gone forward, though.
No, so if I was talking to somebody out of state that had some pull without it being tried as a hate crime, they couldn't offer their lawyer to me because they can't practice in the state of Arkansas.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So I just kind of put all of my hope and my faith into the attorney that I had in Arkansas, and he was very on board with me moving out of there and getting away from the situation. And there was some contact for the first several months that I was in Maine, and he kept assuring me that the case was moving forward. And then just here in the last about 2 to 3 months, I've had no contact with him.
Okay. And you've reached out to him
several times,
and he's not responding. Okay. But you're here now. You've been here how long in Maine?
I've been here since April, so long enough to get acclimated to the area.
Acclimated.
And I've started changing my life in a lot of different revenues or aspects, because one of the first things I started doing when I got here is I started running, started getting healthy, changed my diet. I lost 47 pounds.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah,
That's
thank
huge.
you.
That's
So I wasn't realizing that I was doing this just by being happy and exhibiting my life, but apparently I was inspiring other people. I started getting all these messages from people sending me picked selfies and before and after, and like, you've inspired me to lose weight, and I'm running, and I'm doing this because of you.
Oh,
people were changing their diets because of me. So that inspired me to do it and push it a little harder. So actually, I just ran my first marathon. I ran the Maine Marathon.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, and I've run 4 races this year from somebody who's never, even ran before. So
that's what happens when you're feeling safe and productive. You're able to thrive.
Exactly. Yeah. So life has been great here in Maine. And like I said, I've just been living, just doing what I would do, what I would have just done normally had I just had a normal life. And
and you have a good employment and
exactly. I am actually a kitchen manager here of a restaurant, so my career is back on track, and I'm doing very well in that aspect. And I got invited to go with Sabrina Laughlin, who is...
Please tell us about Sabrina.
Yeah, Sabrina. So Sabrina is this trans woman that I met. I didn't meet, but we became social media friends because she had reached out to me through social media when I was going through everything. And so we'd had a brief discussion before, and she was planning on selling around the world, which I thought was amazing and dangerous and crazy. So that had my interest.
She has my interest too. She's actually connected with me. And she's a Christian. And she's doing this actually, I think, on behalf of transgender Christians to kind of bring some awareness. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Tell me about that.
And so, there was one day that I was I think I posted a selfie of me sitting by the ocean and said something along the lines of just waiting for my sailor. And so she responded immediately and said, I need to talk to you because maybe I'll be your sailor. And I didn't understand what she was talking about.
Right.
So a couple of days passed, and then we made contact, and we had a phone call conversation. And with my culinary background and what I do, she was wanting me to join the team that will be based in Australia as the nutritionist. So which is a huge deal to me because she's going to be at sea for basically 7 months. She can't come to shore.
Yeah.
So she's going to be on this small sailboat. And basically, which is a good timing in my life because especially being a transgender woman and knowing how our bodies work, to be charged with this job, I will be able to stock this boat. Actually, I'm going to plan for 9 months in case there's any problems. Food that's non-perishable and is going to be high energy and keep her going.
Can you give me some examples of what that food would entail?
Well, it's not going to be anything extravagant, I'll say that. Probably lots of rice and things like that are going to provide energy. And we actually have a sponsor right now with, I believe it's Metrics, who's going to provide power bars. So she's not going to expect like a gourmet dinner from me.
No, I would think not,
And I'm really excited about this too because we'll be based out of Australia this summer, which will be their winter. So I'm going to miss my summer. So we're going to be down there. And what I'm hoping that comes out of this and for her to do is and this is kind of my motto and what I'm going for anyways, is just to show trans people accomplishing great tasks and feats. And, because every time you turn on the news or get on social media, you see so-and-so was murdered or so-and-so was fired. How often do you turn it on and you hear somebody did something amazing?
Yeah. We were talking about that before when we were sitting. I said, I can't wait for the day to replace Transgender Day of Remembrance, that it's sort of like, Transgender Day of Celebration, where it starts to be highlighted all the wonderful accomplishments that we've done.
Yeah. And hopefully that day is not very far.
I'd like to think that. Yes, I would. So you're working on that project and things are going. Can I ask if you have anyone significant in your life?
Yeah, I have a girlfriend right now. Her name is Kat. we met here in Maine. We met the first week that I was here. It's strange. I got to Maine on a Saturday.
Okay.
And was working and employed on a Sunday.
Oh my goodness.
So I got here in the middle of the afternoon and was beginning my job the very next day.
Okay.
So I met her at work. I had been working there for about a week and kind of just hanging out in the kitchen. And one night after work, I thought I would go sit down and get to know some of the employees there. So I went up to the bar and got a drink, and there was this woman sitting next to me, and we just had a conversation and exchanged information. And yeah, so we've been, I guess, seeing off and on for a little while. Been very serious for the last little over a month now.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
And that's a huge accomplishment too, after such a trauma too. Most people want to, the instinct is to push someone away, and you're able to rise above that and let someone in.
Yeah, and she's been very supportive of me. In fact, she was kind of the motivating factor to get me on this show tonight and get me to keep continuing my story and keep fighting.
Because it isn't just your story though, is it, right? It's the community's story. And
Exactly.
This is a community show in my mind too. So we'll thank the anonymous cat for that.
Yeah.
So have you met this person in Australia yet? Have you, physically met her, or has just been social media?
It's all been through social media.
Okay.
We haven't met in person yet.
Okay.
So yeah, there's still a lot to talk about and discuss, and I don't want to reveal too much about the meal plan because I'm still doing a lot of research on it to get it just right, and I'm reading about other people that have sailed around the world and kind of what they ate and how their daily routine was.
Yeah. Like, how big is the sailboat?
The sailboat itself, Sabrina, so if Sabrina was here, she'd be able to tell you the model number, the size, all this stuff.
Well, maybe we'll get Sabrina on the show. So.
Yeah, but it's not very large at all, and it's got to be manned by one woman, so.
Yeah, because she's going solo.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so she's not coming on shore. So how is that done? Can you give us some of the nuts and bolts of that?
She will, so once she leaves, we're not allowed to make contact with her. She'll be able to get on social media and stuff and give us updates and things, but unless there's an emergency, we can't contact her. We can't bring her more food or supplies. She can't come ashore. So she's going to be basically 7 months at sea, and just watching some of the videos of when you're out at the waters like that, it's terrifying to me knowing what she's going to be going through. So it's a pretty, to me, it's very significant to have this opportunity to work on a project so large as this. And I wish her the best when she gets out there. So.
I do too. So I'm just curious, I'm just going to throw this question out, but what the heck? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What would you like to see happen?
5 years from now, I imagine myself to still be doing what I love to do, which is cook. And I can see myself still being here in Maine. Yep. Hopefully still with Kat.
Yeah, we hope that too.
Yeah. She's a very positive influence in my life right now. So, yeah, just what any other girl my age would want. I wanted to work on my career and develop my life.
I'm thinking like Iron Woman competitions that you'll be doing 15 miles here. And
hey, who knows? I've already set my sights on the Yellowstone Marathon. Oh. But finding some people that are crazy enough to go do it with me has been a little bit of a struggle.
I'm not familiar with the Yellowstone Marathon.
It's just another really big marathon that's really popular, and it to me, this one stands out because you run through the national parks and it's so beautiful.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Is it for a cause in particular, or is this just kind of for fun more?
I don't know. It just started off kind of for fun, my running, and then I started getting into running actual races, and now I'm starting to get a little competitive with it. So
I love it.
keep liking to push myself to get a little better.
Yeah. I've noticed in our community, a lot of us are into our fitness, and we have to be with the hormones. That's kind of a double, double whammy.
And I went vegan recently, and I had a lot of concerns for there's a high level of potassium in a lot of vegetables and things that you wouldn't think about. Okay. So as far as my nutrition levels go, and with my running, I have to eat almost constantly, which I love to eat, so that's no problem. And being a vegan means I get to eat even more calories. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm constantly just enjoying food, that's for sure.
That's good.
Yeah.
So you're a foodie now.
Exactly.
Okay, good.
Well, I was before. It just showed.
So you get to be a foodie with a good physique. So that really sounds wonderful. And is there anything that you would have liked me to have asked that I didn't bring up for you?
No, I feel like we covered a lot.
That we covered.
It's just hard for me to sit and speak about these things. And I know we're kind of laughing now towards the end of it, but it's going over all this stuff and reliving it and having it still with no closure. I still haven't had any resolve in it. So basically I'm just looking for the day when I don't have to have these conversations and talks.
Yeah. And it would help if somebody would sort of get on the ball and follow up, whether it's seen as a hate crime or not. It was a crime, and it's not like you didn't know who did this. I mean, and he was well known to the police too. So, not sure what's going on with that. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Can I ask, on a personal level, do you struggle with some PTSD symptoms now still, or?
I do, and it's very easy for me to recognize these things and address them. So when I'm having issues with it, I can just focus on something positive and get myself out of that situation really easily. And I know sometimes it's easier for me I'm a little bit tougher than most people. I imagine a lot of people wouldn't be able to deal with what I struggle with and go through, so much from not just the assault, from the suicide attempt, and that's a huge topic of mine that I have concern about, is the suicides in the trans community as well. And so even when I spoke at TDOR last year, that was one of the subjects I really addressed, and I made sure that we mentioned the suicides in the list of names that we called off.
I was wondering that myself, Jacie, because, they said it's a rate of 47%, and that there's new evidence trickling in to suggest that the rate is actually more akin to 87%. And then, of course, there's all those folks that have probably been successful and we don't know anything about.
Exactly.
And it's always been my contention that they're just as much a victim of this crusade as folks who have been murdered. We're running out of time. I just got the thing. Is there any last minute thoughts that you'd like to share with anyone?
No, just thanks for having me on your show and letting me talk about this. And it feels good to just say it and have it all out there.
Thank you, Jacie. So viewers, we took you through a very difficult interview, but as you see, trans people are extremely resilient and sitting here as a thriver. But to bring up anyone who's been through such a trauma as an assault like that, really be mindful. It is never their fault. I don't care how much they drank. I don't care what they were wearing. It does not matter. They did not cause this. And if sometimes we see in the media, why didn't these survivors come forward sooner? And we brought up that, if you shut someone down, they're not going to come forward, and they should never be silenced or shamed. And we got someone here who just provided a beautiful example of how to get beyond the trauma and to thrive. So if you're struggling, please get help. So I want to thank you, and I want to thank all of you out there who've watched this show. Keeping in your heart, our Transgender Day of Remembrance is November 20th, and we would love to see you out there. Your support is vital to the community. So if you are on our side, please show up on Transgender Day of Remembrance. Thank you for watching Diversity Dignified.